Bluegrass Airport is an American aviation story. Its remarkable history has been chronicled through a series of oral history interviews. We are speaking with Dr. Ray Garman, former chairman of both the Lexington-Fayette Urban County Airport Board and the Aviation Museum of Kentucky. He also served as co-chair of the Flight 5191 Memorial Commission. Ray, how did you get interested in aviation?
When I was a young boy, I grew up in Washington, D.C. And not too far from where I grew up was Andrews Air Force Base, where they brought people back in that days at the end of World War II in Korea, the troops back, and I got to able to see every kind of airplane there was. And I loved airplanes and have ever since. I got interested also in aviation because when I was a boy I built every kind of model airplane you can think of, flew model airplanes with these small engines both on the wire and free flight and rubber band models, and I never got uninterested in aviation.
When did you get your pilot's license?
After I graduated from college, I went to medical school. While in medical school, everyone had to decide whether they were going to be drafted or go in the military. As a physician, I chose the latter, and then I had a chance when I went in the Air Force to become a flight surgeon. So I jumped at the chance and went to flight school in the Air Force, learned the theory of flight, and served as a flight surgeon between active and reserve for 36 years, flying everything from C-47s to F-16s as the second pilot. I love airplanes.
Would you talk about your involvement with the Aviation Museum of Kentucky?
Didn't know much about it, and I heard a little bit about it, and then when I first came on the Bluegrass Airport board, of course they were briefing us on what they did, and then they invited me to be a member of the museum, which I did, and after I retired from the airport board, I went on their board and ultimately became the chairman of the board, from which I will step down at the end of 2011. So I first knew it as a collection of old airplanes, and then over the next several years began to understand what more the museum had to offer to the Bluegrass than just a collection of old airplanes. This week, on Monday, I did an aviation physical on a young man from Eastern Kentucky University, where they have a flight training program. And I said, as you asked me, what makes you interested in aviation? And he said, this is really true. I went to the Bluegrass Airport, to the Aviation Museum of Kentucky for their summer camp for 4 years in a row because I liked it so much. And even though I started in EKU in political science, I had decided, I don't want to be a lawyer. I want to fly for the airlines. So that's why he was there.
Did you have any aviation mentors?
Absolutely not. It was all self-generated. My father was a World War II casualty, so there was not even no male figures in my youth for the most part. And then when I was about 13, a Marine veteran from World War II kind of befriended me because he was living in the same apartment complex. So yeah, I guess I had a mentor figure in that of a strong male. He was an ex-Marine, but never any aviation.
Did you ever think of becoming an astronaut?
I would have loved to have been an astronaut, but they would have had to have changed the vision standards.
With your many years associated with Bluegrass Airport, which accomplishments were most difficult to achieve?
I think the second runway, which has been needed for a long, long time, was difficult. When I first came aboard, we were talking about putting a runway parallel to this one, but way out over in the horse farms, and it was a great deal of civic resistance to it, even though people understood we did need a crosswind runway and we needed more capacity. And it took a lot of public meetings and a fair amount of discussion with the public to have people, A, understand that the need was there, and B, that we could do it, and C, to convince people that even putting it on the property parallel to the Versailles Road, which we ended up doing, was indeed not only expeditious, practical, and now done.
So is that the accomplishment you're most proud of?
That's one. I think the second was hiring some of the great people we've hired after some turmoil in the past. There was a great team at Bluegrass Airport now. And I think I'm quite proud of the fact that with the aid of Bluegrass Airport, we've been able to move the Aviation Museum of Kentucky from a cramped, small, one hangar to two large hangars with a dedicated space outside. And now we finally have a venue that's attractive to people to visit us, not only at Bluegrass Airport, but at the Aviation Museum of Kentucky.
As chairman of the airport board, did you have to become immersed in operational and technical details?
Chairing the board, I think it's important that boards understand they are there to set overall direction and to monitor activities. And the several of boards I'm on and have been on, I'm quite opposed to board members who think they have to delve down to the operational defects, operational aspects of operating the base. That's what the professionals get paid to doing. It is important, however, for the board to understand they do have an active role. My case, since I'm very mechanically oriented, I was very interested in things like building the new runway and how we set up the fence to keep deer from jumping over it and how high does it have to be. The answer is perhaps 12 feet at certain places and things of that nature. But I tried never to get in operational detail other than the fact almost everything we do at the airport costs so much that the board has to be carefully involved in the financing of it.
When you chaired the airport board, did you get a lot of feedback from people in the community?
If you're known out to the community as a board member, you become a lightning rod for complaints, and you hear a fair number of them, and of course the staff will take care of it once they're notified. It's difficult to deal with people who have complaints but no suggestion for how to resolve the complaint. I don't have answers for that.
Talk about being part of the aviation community and the larger Lexington community.
Well, let me address the airport itself as an aviation community. You know, you've heard the phrase, aviation is a jealous mistress. There is no question that people who fly or are involved in any aspect of aviation really feel that bond towards being up in the air. And I think one of the attractions of flying of it is that here on Earth you can only go right or left or up and down. You only have two dimensions. In aviation you have three dimensions, and when you fly you can do that and go up and down, and you have a sense of freedom in flight that you don't have otherwise. You also have the ability to screw up in three dimensions and kill yourself in three dimensions, which also adds to the attraction for certain people at least of flying. But there's no question aviation as an entity really does draw people in. And I think one of the aspects of Bluegrass Airport is that the teams that have been here the whole time I've been since 1995 when I came to the area have always been cohesive in understanding that the Bluegrass Airport is in competition with larger airports around us, have been sensitive to that, in my opinion, have been extremely effective in making sure that service to the Bluegrass is competitive compared to some of the competitive airports to us. And from my perspective, even more importantly, the people that work here appreciate the Bluegrass community and respond to the Bluegrass community. And if you look at the attractiveness of this venue compared to some of the airports that are nearby, and the can-do spirit of the people that work at Bluegrass Airport, you understand this is, in my opinion, and lots of other people's opinions, a special place. And that's why we want to be here so much. So the best aspect of Bluegrass Airport is the positive attitude of the people, in my opinion. Let me talk a little bit more about the second runway. That it took a lot of difficulty in getting that runway approved and then financed, and there was a lot of discussion about how long it had to be. for a second runway, since we were primarily planning for that for general aviation, but still allow smaller jets to land. And we did end up achieving that. There was a lot of discussion about, do we need 5,000 feet on a second runway? And ultimately, I think we would, or we will, but we have 4,000 and slightly, 4,000 and a little bit, and it's a great, it's expanded this, so this is now an airport. Well, in addition to the commercial traffic we have, we now can train as many people that want to train there as can, and we have an active general aviation community that's well cared for by the staff, and they feel that sense of community. And the last part of the community that makes this positive is TAC Air, our FBO here, because they have the same sense of mission. We're going to make it happen. And of course, the Aviation Museum has been a benefactor of a lot of support from TAC Air. So yeah, I'm really sold on Bluegrass Airport.
Could you speak to the formation of the 5191 Memorial Commission?
A little bit over 5 years ago, we lost a plane off the end of a runway. We had 49 people that were lost. There was an immediate response from not only the Bluegrass Airport, but from the firefighters of Lexington and from the police force, and we were able to rescue one person out of a burning crash. And immediately thereafter, a bunch of families got together a bunch of people here in Lexington got together to support the families of the lost ones. An interesting, fascinating thing about this, I think everyone who lived in the Bluegrass, perhaps those even as wide as Kentucky, we all knew at least one person who was on that plane, because they came from the philanthropic community, came from the business community, and came from the social community of Lexington. And we all had a sense of loss, and you could feel it. So the community got together, and at the Campbell House, a venue was set up for the families to be there. That was run by Jerry Vandermeer, who was in charge of the Campbell House at that time. And there were a bunch of memorabilia and a temporary memorial set up at the crash site. And that was tended to, it turned out, ultimately, by the Aviation Museum of Kentucky. So Jerry Vandermeer, from that standpoint, and the chairman of the board of the Aviation Museum of Kentucky, myself, we ended up being co-chair of a commission appointed by the governor and the mayor to see couldn't we do something more appropriate about memorialization of this crash, and we did, and it took us 5 years. The sequence was, we had some meetings where at first there was some real suspicion of Jerry and I, because we were government appointees and the families were still grieving, and with help from Bluegrass Hospice, United Way, Red Cross, and some other community supporters, we actually would set up a support system for the families, and it went quite well considering the circumstances that it started from. And we ended up having a wonderful first anniversary for the families, and at Southland Christian, which went well. And then we've had some more memorials since. And the commission that was composed of representatives from these several civic organizations, Jerry and I, and some governmental people, plus some of the families of the lost ones, ended up deciding we need to do something more permanent. So we went through a process where the commission members, particularly some of the family members, were getting over the fact that Jerry and I came from the government support, and with support from the Bluegrass Airport in the form of Tiffany Carter, who's been our kind of our administrative support for the 5 years. After that team building, we decided that we needed to do something permanent, and we had, after the year and a half of team building, it took about 3/4 of a year to decide what to do, and we decided not to have a memorial safety seminar, we decided not to have scholarships. We decided to have a permanent entity. So we decided we'd build a memorial was the appropriate thing to do. Then it was realized that you can't have a memorial without telling the artist where the venue, where the site is. So we spent 9 months finding the site. If you want fun, get a team of civilians, put them in a white bus and drive it all over Lexington, where the bus has Lexington police on the side, and you can park anywhere you want, and no one absolutely will interfere with you. So that's what the Lexington Fayette County government provided for us. And we looked at venues all the way from the horse park down to Jacobson Park. And after a fair amount of discussion, we decided that the appropriate place for the memorial would be in the garden already established by Hospice, a garden of remembrance at the Arboretum. And then when that was done, and we had permission to do that, to joint venture with Hospice in this, then we sent out a request for qualifications for artists, preferably for Kentucky artists. We had 44 qualified entries, and we had a committee of the family that Jerry and I didn't participate in to choose the 5 artists that we felt represented the best option for remembering appropriately our lost loved ones. And that venue, that was pretty complicated because they had to submit a budget and a maquette, an actual model of what they proposed. And after we had the maquettes in, we had a meeting and chose the artist that won the, Dow Bloomberg, the artist that won the competition, and subsequently he submitted plans. We raised the money from all over the state and from state and local businesses, enough money to fund it, and we built it and dedicated it, and there it stands. When we dedicated the memorial, the governor came, the mayor came, and dignitaries, and also the director of the National Transportation Safety Board, Dadri Hirschberg, who was the chair of the local committee, but not chair of the full board at the time when she came here right after our crash. She's been very supportive. A couple of our family members of the commission now are sometimes on the road for the National Transportation Safety Board, talking to survivors of other crashes about so that's something we as a commission have been able to offer to the rest of the aviation community. One of the design aspects that we thought was important was that the names would be inscribed on the memorial, and they are on the periphery, and that's made it good. And from those names, the design is such you see a swirl of birds going up towards heaven. And one of the interesting aspects of that, I think, is an idea that came up that perhaps within each bird we could have a small cache where mementos from one of the lost loved ones could be. So inside that memorial are 49 little tubes with something submitted by each family for their lost loved ones, which is sealed in there in perpetuity. And we don't know who's in which one, so it's, again, represents the group that we lost and continue to love.
Any closing thoughts related to Bluegrass Airport or the Aviation Museum of Kentucky?
The Aviation Museum mission is not only to hold exhibits for people to see, but we like to be in education. And one of the things we think it's important is that we continue to try to get youth, and sort of in the way I mentioned before, interested in aviation, and aviation as a career, not just flying, but in aircraft maintenance or in care of flights, such as people up in the tower, and we support that. And I still maintain my great interest in Bluegrass Airport and Aviation Museum, and continue to want them to be as tightly connected as they have been in the past.